All right, take two. Take one with 17 minutes long, and I didn't want to use it. So this is a more rambly theory video. So if you're new and you're not used to it and you don't like it, then I understand. Anyway, this is my opportunity to introduce the other Puka Nakua, Michael Wilson. And if I'm right, I'm right, and I get to gloat about it. And if I'm wrong, then I basically could just talk about like how I use my roster going forward and how stashes work and being careful about like if a guy that doesn't have a predictive pattern of why I wouldn't be putting him on my bench, and I would not be spending on him to do so. So anyway, Michael Wilson here. He was a camp hype guy. He was injured in college. That's why he fell to the third round. He blew it up in the Senior Bowl. All the camp hype around him was just like with Puka Nakua. The difference is like he's playing in this low volume passing offense in Arizona, and Puka Nakua went to the offense with Matt Stafford. So comparisons are bad because there's a lot of opportunity involved and a lot of scheme fit. But it's not unfair for me to say he reminds me a lot of DeAndre Hopkins. And if you look on the screen, like Michael Wilson is a tick slower in the 40, but all of his other measurables are better than DeAndre Hopkins. And I can put them right next to each other. You can take a quick look if you're that interested in it. And they're both kind of these contested touch guys. Michael Wilson to me is a little bit more polished, but that's probably the game has evolved a little bit more. Wide receivers are a little bit polished overall. DeAndre Hopkins was much more physical, but they're both kind of those contested catch type of like big body bullies, and those guys are more important from a fantasy perspective than your little dink and dunk slots, because like those outside routes, they have the ability to put in more points per receptions than just those dink and dunks, and they can turn into touchdowns, and touchdowns, like we're chasing touchdowns now. So a good example is like how many receptions and yards do like your Josh Downs and Zay Flowers need to get those little long handcuffs or handoffs, when a guy like Michael Wilson can just get a 30-yard contested catch in the end zone, and you've got an instant 40-degree day in your roster or on your lineup, and everything after that is gravy, like towards winning your week. That's why guys like this are like really important. And when you look at like Arizona's receivers, like Hollywood Brown, Rondell Moore are both like 5'9", 5'7". Greg Dortch is 5'7". Zach Pasquale is the other guy who's like 6'2", 215, but he's got 2 targets on the year, 1 reception. Like I'm not really worried about that. Michael Wilson, he's 90% snaps week 1, 43% snaps week 2, 67% snaps week 3. The big difference between him and Rashid Rice, like Rashid Rice was like 5 receptions on 7 targets on 51% snaps. He goes ruled down on the 1 yard line. That's why he wasn't higher up on lists to go get on this high volume, good offense in Kansas City. Michael Wilson probably would have been on people's lists this week if I can find a way to pull him up, except for the fact that like he had a busted coverage and he didn't get into the end zone. So like the spike weeks for everybody are going to come in the NFL, and if we can't understand why they're happening, a busted coverage that turns into a touchdown, they're going to be on the top of a whole bunch of people's like waiver wires, and they're just not going to matter because they're not going to have predictive ability after that week. Um, and we can say that sometimes there's going to be matchups. I'm trying to read my notes. We can say that sometimes there's going to be matchups, but those matchups are not always predictive to what actually happens from a production standpoint. Like, let's see. My point here is if I'm just stashing a guy to stash him and he's not in my lineup, like all that guy actually does is clog up my space, and he's just wasted my fab and my waiver claim. And I can have the prettiest bench in the world, but at a certain point, my lineup has to produce for me. We're to the point of the bye weeks, and there's really no more stashing that should be going on. Like maybe there's one guy that I can stash, like a Quentin Johnson, that's more than like a 1 week wait and see. Like he has to develop into the offense because that non-predictive injury occurred. But like other than that, like what I'm really stashing is defenses 1 week ahead, or sometimes I might have to put in a guy on my bye week. So like I'm looking for that. There could be the outside chance of those matchups again, but past my RB3 and my wide receiver 3, like the other spots on my roster are should be taken up for guys that I know I'm going to use, like those wide receiver 4s and those wide receiver 5s. Like, they have a hard road to lineups. Like, those deeper running back stashes, like, they have hard roads to running backs. Like, that's why, like, a handcuff is so important to me, because I can guarantee there's a situation where I will use that guy, and I will use him a lot. So wasting that spot on one hypothetical is okay, but a guy where, like, a Michael Wilson, where it's like, well, if I can just magically create this volume in this low efficiency offense, like, then he's a league winner. That's why I can't bring him up, but he's gonna spike at a certain point this week. There's going to be a lot of guys that spike, and I want to understand why before I just go like, well, I got to go get him, right? Let's see. There's a lot of spike weeks that are going to happen. Like guys like Treylon Burks and Chig, they're just on bad offenses. It doesn't matter how good they are. It really doesn't. In most leagues, and I shouldn't have to say this at all, wide receiver 3s just clog benches. Like their stashes clog benches as we go into the bye weeks. Like, they're not going to help anybody win games, and that's what I'm looking for, is how do I win my weeks? How do I win my individual weeks? So, like, a guy like Elijah Moore that I talked about the other day, as my wide receiver 3, like, he's very predictive on what piece of the pie he gets in Cleveland, and I will use him during the bye week phase. That's why I was big on him. Like, he's going in my lineup. I know I've got a 40-degree day, and if I get that touchdown, then I win a week. That's how simple it is. And I already talked about Quentin Johnson. He's probably going to be my only stash, because, like, he needs to grow into that offense, and there's a chance that he ascends to that number one in that Chargers offense, because Keenan Allen's a little bit older and he's limited. And then I have a league winner. So, like, that's the extent of it. So, like, a Michael Wilson, it's a hard road to say, well, like, maybe Kyler comes back, or maybe Dobbs just starts like peppering him with targets. It's hard to find that with just how they've used him in Arizona after 3 weeks, because otherwise, in other situations, if Michael Wilson was switched with Quentin Johnston, like, this is a league winner, like 100%. But he's not. He's in a bad situation, and waiting for a guy like this to have that spike week just to say, like, I called it, is bad roster construction for me, right? Like, I don't want to be chasing non-predictive spike weeks at all, right? And it doesn't matter if Michael Wilson is or isn't a young DeAndre Hopkins. He needs to produce predictively, and that's like all the stashes that are or not just not all the stashes that are coming up, but like from this point on, because we already kind of have looked at like all the opportunity and snap shares of all guys that are happening out there. We know who's going up. We kind of know who's going down. We know where the targets are going. We know what the workloads are going to look like in certain game scripts. So, like, if a guy just pops up and has this odd week, like, I have to be able to tell the story about how he got there and if he's able to do it again. Otherwise, like, what am I using my waivers for? Other than to pick up a guy and hold him, maybe I'm keeping him away from my opponents, for this non-predictive spike week. But if they're putting them into their lineup for a non-predictive spike week, then, like, I probably want to be going up against that guy, because what are the chances that he has like one or two, 3 spike weeks that most guys in the NFL have when they have healthy usage. So anyway, I was able to keep this under 10 minutes. That's just kind of my thought process about how to handle waiver wires and stashes from this point forward, and just kind of not keeping the clog there as we hit bye weeks. So anyway, maybe I'll think of something tomorrow.